It is amazing to be here at the 2024 Audrain Newport Concours Motor Week at this incredible Emery reunion. We've got generations of Emery cars going back to Rod Emery's grandfather. And this is a really exciting thing, and Rod himself and the inimitable Jay Leno are going to take you through a great tour of some of the highlights of this amazing collection of highlights. Go at it, guys.
Let's do it. Let's start with, I'm trying to think of an analogy that people in that car people could understand. I think it's like rock and roll and rap. Rock and roll was a rebellious form of music, and when rap came along, everybody ignored it. It really wasn't music. But it got bigger and bigger, and then finally gets accepted as a whole thing of its own. And that's what you guys have done. Your grandfather, your father, you took cars that you didn't mess with. Porsches were always expensive. When a Corvette had 300 horsepower and was $4,500, the Porsche was 60 horsepower and $5,000. It was
right.
Always that much. So the idea that someone would modify it and channel it, heresy, get out. And then they just became revered. A whole generation of people realized how good they were and how cool it was. And that's sort of what you've done here. Let's start with, this is your grandfather's first custom?
It wasn't his first custom, but it's a very iconic car.
Okay.
This is a 1950 Oldsmobile Holiday that he customized in the early 50s. The car's named the Polynesian.
Right.
And if you look at this car, what's so special and unique about it is that it's very classy and very sleek looking, but my grandfather loved the European styling of cars where
Right.
they were thinner bodies, and so he took a 50 Oldsmobile and sectioned it. So he was really one of the pioneers of sectioning and channeling cars.
And explain what sectioning and channeling is.
So a lot of the customizers wanted to make the cars lower by chopping the top. So they would take a section out of the top and lower the windshield. But my grandfather kind of took the hard route, and he would either channel a car where you take the whole floor pan of the car and you channel the body over the frame
to lower it.
Or he would section it, which is really what he was known for. And sectioning is where you take a section of the car out and you don't just cut it. You have to really have some engineering and some thought goes into it, because the car has a lot of different radiuses and planes. So he took 4 inches out of the entire side of this car, and there's 4 inches here and here and then here, because he has to take it out of the highest point of the body. So the sections are actually taken out in different areas. And then also changing the bumpers and the grille of the car. So this car is 4 inches thinner in the belly because he sectioned it.
Well, the thing I like is I still recognize it as an Oldsmobile.
Yeah.
And then you go, wait, there's no door handle. Wait, those taillights look, it isn't jarring. It isn't, I hate it when I see something, I go, what was that? Oh, it's a 48 Cadillac. Really? I don't recognize it. It's got a digital dash. It's got I still recognize this as the period it was in. It's just a better version, and I think, and it's tasteful. It's not crazy wild, That's what I love about it, because it takes you a minute to, oh wait, that's not the stock, but it integrates so well, you assume it came from the factory that way.
Yeah, and that's really I think the thought process that my grandfather instilled in myself, my father, and now I've instilled in my son and son-in-law is modify everything, but make it look as if it wasn't modified. Right. And I think that's really the key to the Emery cars is my grandfather was the master at that. Whether it was a 40 Ford that he sectioned and channeled and pancaked the hood, or it was a 29 Roadster that he built a special track nose for, everything that he did back in the day had that very period look.
And that was probably, it's going to be $500 to do that. Ooh.
Well, yeah, I have copies of all the invoices from all the cars that he built. And, a complete custom job, paint job, suspension work, lowering kit, it was maybe $900.
I know. He didn't get rich doing this.
He didn't. And he was very passionate. He and his brother-in-law, Clayton Jensen, started Valley Custom Shop in the mid-40s or late 40s after the war, and they ran that business all the way into the early 60s. And then my grandfather, in the 60s, he was at a point where he didn't want to do custom paint jobs and insurance work, and he was offered a position at Porsche at one of the dealerships in Orange County, Chick Iverson VW Porsche, to run the body shop. And at the time, Porsche really needed somebody that was a craftsman that could repair the early 356s and the 911s that were coming up properly, because he was a craftsman. He was a metalman,
Right.
you know, metal shaper and metal worker. So he took his custom car skills and then started applying that to Porsches, which is where my father and myself have really made our life's work, you know, come together.
And the cool part is, much like the old masters who painted paintings for nothing, and then years later it's worth $1 million, $2 million, $5 million. It's kind of the same thing with this. This car probably would have sold for $900 in the 70s, the 80s. That's probably a lot of money, maybe a lot less than that. And now it's valued for what it is. It's thousands of thousands. You're in the $100,000 range, I'm sure, bro.
It is, yeah. You know, I think that the market and the enthusiasts in you know, the automotive world have really started to appreciate custom cars, especially in the last, I'd say, 10 to 20 years. They've really appreciated the, you know, the styling and the evolution of what those cars have brought, and also their contribution to automotive design. And now the collector market has appreciated cars like, you know, like the Polynesian.
Right. Well, here's a good example. You know, I didn't know this car. I'd never seen this car. I walked into a warehouse, had a ton of cars, and I went, boy, I like the way that 55 T-Bird sits. It just has nice posture, the slight custom. And he said, oh, that's my dad's car. And I went, I didn't know that. It wasn't a setup. It just caught my eye. And that, to me, is what really makes it cool. It was a totally honest, well, this is Rod's car, so say you like it. I mean, none of that. No, you know what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you see it. But I just saw it, and I say, Rod, look at this car. And I thought it belonged to just somebody, a warehouse full of cars. And yeah, just perfect. It's exactly, and the fact that in this year, 70 years later, it's exactly the way I would like it. It's no modern touch I want to put in here, you know.
Yeah, so my grandfather and Valley Custom Shop, they did 3 T-Birds during the 50s and 60s, and this is one of them. They built one for Dean Batchelor, who was my grandfather's best friend and writer in all the magazines. And this one and another one were built together. And like you said, it's just very subtle and customized. The grill's been changed, the lights have been changed, it has a nice presence and stance. They just did a very nice, subtle custom to this car, and it's still the original lacquer paint. You can see a few of the rub-through marks.
Right.
But this car is exactly as it was in the 50s. And I reached out to the owner of the car, a gentleman, Bob, in St. Louis, earlier this year, knowing that we were putting this event on. And I said, Bob, how's the T-Bird doing? And he says, oh, it's great. You know, I drive it all the time. He said, you know, in fact, I just put a new battery in it. I said, well, I'd love to see it in Newport, Rhode Island at the end of the year. And he goes, well, you know, he's 82 years old. He says, I think it's time that the car makes its way back to the Emery family. And so he gave me an opportunity to purchase it from him.
Great.
And we rolled it out and just polished it and cleaned it. But it is exactly as the car was built.
Well, the thing I love is these are really white wall tires. They've just been dabbed with a little bit of black to kind of
tone them down.
Tone it down. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just brilliant. It's just, just having that artist's eye, which most people do not have.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what makes it cool. That's what makes it great.
Yeah, lots of fun. And this silver car over here.
Let's go take a look.
Let's take a look at that, because that's really the link between the hot rod history of our family and the Porsche stuff. So my dad, he grew up working for Chick Iverson at Volkswagen Porsche.
Oh, sure.
And was the parts manager. My grandfather ran the body shop. And so my dad, you know, he wanted to customize cars, but now Porsches are the canvas rather than American cars. And so this particular car was a car that in the 80s my dad had bought, and he wanted to hot rod it out a little bit. It's a special car with a Goldie sunroof, like a full rag top, like the VWs used to have.
Is that factory?
That's factory.
I was gonna say, it looks like
yeah,
something you just
it's a factory Goldie sunroof that was on this car. And so my dad bought this car, and I can remember at the back of his parts shop, he had a little room where we would take the cars and lower them. And this car, we removed the hubcaps and polished the drums, and added the number 18 hand painted on there, and that little German Falcon on the side. And
are those Alphen brake drums?
These are the original 356 vintage or finned brake drums that have just been polished.
Oh, okay.
So lots of little GT hot rod items that have been done to this car.
Now the aerodynamic cover over the over the mirror. Is that your dad or is that factory?
Well, so Porsche on their Spiders and on their GT cars, they made these shrouded mirrors. And so when my dad had this car, he's like, I'd love to put some of those GT elements into my car. And he built a shrouded mirror that we installed on the car. So this was one of the cars in the 80s that my dad was customizing in the back of his parts shop when all of his customers were coming in and they were buying parts for their cars to make them full Concours original restored cars. And they were walking up going, oh, how can you do that? That's blasphemy. You can't hot rod out these cars. And so that's when we made that little Outlaw badge for the back of the cars that said 356 Outlaws, because if we aren't allowed to enter the Concours and the shows with our cars, we'll just create our own little group.
Yeah. And what year is this one?
This is a 1963.
Same as mine.
A T6B, so it's still a drum brake car.
Right.
So this was one of those cars that really is the link. And then right after this car was done is when I built my first full build, which is the number 80 blue one right behind you. So
let's go take a look at that. And what year are we starting with here?
This is a 1953.
Wow, that's an early car.
So an early car that my dad found all rusted out, and he bought for me for $1,200 when I was 14 years old. And I was working for my dad every summer and every moment I had in his workshop or in his part shop. And so he said, Rod, he goes, I'll buy you this car, but you have to do the restoration on it. So this was my first car, and the first car that I got to build when I was 14. I finished it when I was 16 years old. Got my driver's license, and a week later I got my racing license at Willow Springs Raceway.
Oh, that's great.
And that's really the beginning of Emery Motorsports and my life surrounding Porsche.
Is the engine modified as well, or is it stock?
So the engine is a 1300cc modified engine that I was able to vintage race with.
Right.
But really what I did with this car is I took a 53 coupe, which normally would have been a bent window, not a split window.
Right.
And it would have had exterior bumpers, not body bumpers. So I took a 53 coupe, we restored it, I split the windshield, put body bumpers, hood straps, hand-painted numbers, louvers on the deck lid hinges, all that stuff. And then I went vintage racing it. And a few years after building this car is where I was racing at the Portland Historic Car Races. And I met a gentleman that had started Kettle Potato Chips or Kettle Foods.
Right.
And he came up to me, he was sponsoring the event, and he said, I would love to be a race car driver. And then he commissioned for us to build a car for him, which was the first car that I got to build and make some money doing.
Right.
And the rest is history. From this car, we started building cars for customers.
And we should explain, you touched on this, but you guys weren't allowed to enter Porsche sanctioned events because these were not Porsches, because you guys had screwed them up.
Well, they weren't full Concours stock Porsches.
Right.
So there wasn't a class at the Concours and the events for modified or customized Porsches.
Right.
And so in the beginning, this particular car, we went to my first event and they didn't have a class for it. There wasn't an Outlaw class back then.
Right.
And so it could get some people's choice, but there wasn't any acceptance at the events. Now every Porsche event, whether it's PCA or whether it's a 356 registry event, one of the most popular classes is the Outlaw class, and it has to do with the fact that people just really are drawn to personalized cars. Because you can only look at so many Red Sea coupes in a line. And so when you start lowering them, doing some little things, it starts to bring a little bit more of the personality.
And so many Porsche people have followed you, have followed all your cues to going with all these type of deals and these type of mirrors and the filler cap through the hood and all that kind of. Oh, it's really exciting. It's fun to see.
So yeah, this was my first Outlaw that I did.
And you pass it on to your son right here.
So his name is on the side of this car. When Zane, who was on the show with us a few weeks ago, when Zane was 6 years old, we used to do these races called the CSRG Historic Car Races, and they had a mechanics picnic on Saturday and Sunday that you could bring your mechanic. Well, Zane was 6 years old, but he was my mechanic, so we had a helmet for him, a suit, and he used to do all these races with me in the passenger seat of the car.
Oh, that's great. And moms love that.
Moms take your kid out there at speed on the track.
In a racetrack. Oh, yeah.
I don't think the insurance companies allow that kind of stuff anymore, but that was 20-something years ago.
Now, what's next?
So about 15 years later, I built my first what I call Emery Special, which is the silver one. right up there at the head end. So let's go take a walk
Let's take
and
a
I'll tell
look.
you about that car.
Very nice. Tell us about this now.
Well, following in my grandfather Neil Emery's footsteps and my father Gary Emery about customizing cars and really making them, modifying everything, but making it look like something Porsche may have built. In 1998, Porsche had their 50th anniversary event at Laguna Seca Raceway, and I wanted to show up with a car that was special and unique. So I took a 1964 Cabriolet and customized every inch of it. My wife and I spent 11 months building this car. We didn't know at the time when we started that 9 months later we'd have a child.
Right.
And so initially we were thinking we're gonna build this nice little convertible and cruise it to Monterey and do these events and do a little tour. Then we found out that she was gonna be, we were gonna have a child.
Really?
A month before the event. So I'll show you what we had to do to accommodate that. But taking a 356 Cabriolet, I leaned the nose back, flattened the hood, leaned the windshield back, rolled the doors and rockers under, much like my grandfather did sectioning cars. I wanted to make the body of the car look thinner. So I rolled the doors and body line under to make that body thinner.
And this is a removable top as well.
Removable top. Originally it was gonna be a Cabriolet convertible, but with a child, we needed to have a roof on the top.
Right.
And so we made a removable hard top for it that we lowered, lengthened the tail, and then I put this special trailer hitch in the back because now we've got a child, so we gotta carry,
put the kid in the U-Haul.
gotta carry all of his junk, the stroller and the playpen and all the stuff you think you need with your first child and come to realize you don't. Even the little baby seat in the back.
Oh, that's funny.
And so Amy and 2-month-old Zane and I drove from McMinnville, Oregon, where we were living at the time, to Monterey, towing a little aluminum Ariba Puch trailer.
That's fine.
We did the Monterey trip, and then we did a 5,000-mile road trip in the car in 1998, visiting all of our family and sharing our son and our car with them. So this is my first, what I call Emery Special, where it's a fully customized and special 356.
Aluminum?
Everything on the car is steel.
Oh, it's steel. Wow.
Yep, everything is steel.
And this is plastic or
That's
plastic?
plastic.
Okay.
Yep, plastic
But boy,
windows.
just to make, it is so hard to roll this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's impossible. You know, it's so funny. We live in an era now where people don't really appreciate other people's jobs. You know, people go, how much? I'm not paying that for that. Because they think you just stamp out a roof. I mean, it's out. How many hours to make that roof?
Well, so we started with part of an original Cabriolet removable hardtop, but we had to completely reshape it and chop it and resection it and make a new perimeter. So, I mean, I probably spent 2 weeks just doing the roof.
So you probably put about $10 an hour.
Yeah, exactly.
By the time you get out of it.
Well, we still own the car, so the guys never paid me for the work that I did on it. You know.
No, but you know what I mean. I mean, it just people don't really understand or appreciate. As we get further away from actually working with our hands in everyday life, it makes you less appreciate. You know, you got someone who had to fix a washing machine, and then you call the guy and, oh man, I'm so glad you're here. How much is that? Here you go. But you know, if you've never done that, you think, oh, everybody's trying to rip you. I always hate this idea that all mechanics are crooks and all restoration places are trying to. I mean, admittedly there are some, but the most are not that way at all.
They're hard workers that go out there early in the morning and late at night. So this car really was the car that showed our customers in the world that a 356 that I build can be used as an adventure car, something that you can take out and really drive. This car's got 200 horsepower and nice big brakes. And so it was this car that really started our business building Outlaws and Specials commission cars for people, like the car that I built for John Oates,
let's go take a look at
the one
that
down here.
Yeah. Let me ask you something, because you know, you're lucky. You lived in an era when these things began to be appreciated. I imagine your grandfather and your dad, they build a car, as much as they want to keep it, they got to sell it to work on the next car. Whereas you've been able to, you have almost everything you've ever had, right? Have you ever sold anything?
I've sold a few cars. I had to sell my little Emery Special down there for a short period of time so that I could keep the employees' paychecks coming, but I was able to reacquire and get that car back. My number 80 car actually doesn't belong to me anymore. I donated it to a charity in 2010, and it raised $180,000 in their raffle to put limbs on people that had lost limbs. But it's in the hands of a great owner here in the Northeast that lets me bring the car to events.
So you literally sold it for an arm and a leg.
I literally sold it for an arm and a leg. Except for I didn't make any money on it. But this was at a time when in 2008 to 2010 when charities were struggling a bit because the economy was down, and I had worked with the charity for a decade prior to that. And in 2009, they approached me and said, "Is there, can you build a raffle car for us or do something?" And I said, "I don't have time to build a car, but I'll donate my personal car."
That's great.
And it had served me well, and now it's in the hands of a great owner.
Now this looks like almost a factory custom. This looks like it came from Germany. Everything looks proportional. There's nothing. I see a lot of cars. I can see the indentations from the wheel and all that. Nothing. I mean, this is really beautiful. Is this probably your most, quote, professional, money no object one? You know what I'm saying?
This is a really special car. This is a car that I built for John Oats from the band Hall & Oates. John is a Porsche guy. He's been a Porsche guy since he bought his first turbo, I think late 70s, early 80s. But he had a period of time where he didn't own any Porsches, and he contacted me about 2016 or 17 and said, "Hey, I'm turning 70 in a few years. I'd love to have a customized bespoke Porsche for myself and gift myself for my 70th birthday." I didn't know John, but I've come to know him very well since then.
Yeah, great guy.
3.5 years later at Rennsport Reunion in 2018, we introduced his car, but this is actually a 60 cabriolet, so it would have been a later car that we backdated, and then we put an earlier nose on, leaned the windshield back, did a similar removable hardtop like I have on my car.
Oh, this is removable.
Yeah.
Boy, it's so well done. Wow.
So removable hardtop and a lot of special customized things. John wanted the seating position to be just right for him, so we put the seat in the right spot, moved the dash down and made it really comfortable for him to drive. And John's been a great champion of our cars and takes us to events all over the place. And in fact, he and I will be doing a seminar here tomorrow on the Emery Reunion and the history of Emery Outlaws.
Very good, very good. Well, it's just a beautiful car. And what color is that?
So Porsche had a color in the early 50s called graphite metallic.
Do you always try to get Porsche colors?
We always start with a Porsche color.
Right.
And then we might tweak it. So, John loved graphite metallic, but he says, "Hey," he goes, "I'd love for it to be a little brighter or, pop a little bit more." So after a few cocktails of cocktailing paint, we came up with a color that was started as graphite metallic and now just has a little bit more pitch and picks up the highlights a little more.
It's just beautiful car. Very nice. Well, I was fortunate enough to drive this car, so it was very impressive. Here, take a look.
Well, there's a lot more throttle there than I thought. Wow.
It's a long throttle throw.
It's a long throw, yeah.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I've taken people for rides, and they're kind of like, "Wait a minute, what's going on here?"
So most people know us for the 356s that we build.
Right.
But we oftentimes will do a original restoration or a stock restoration, or we'll do a 911 project here and there, but it's only for clients or customers that we've already built one of our Outlaw or Specials for.
Right.
For example, the 356 SL that you featured on Jay Leno's Garage, that was a very unique car that that was Porsche's first race car and the first Porsche to win the 24 Hours of Le Mans. And in the 911 stuff, we actually just finished a really great 911 that I want to show you that we did for Mike here at Audrain.
Right.
That is what I call the gentleman's RSR.
Let's take a look. Hey, are we ever going to run out of 356s?
We'll never run out of 356s. There's plenty that were poorly restored back in the 70s and 80s that we can, bring back to life.
Well, let's take a look. Again, it's one of those Ron Emery things where you have to look at it. Oh, whoa, I just realized this is two-tone. Plus, you got a gray stripe here. It's all the subtle stuff that really makes it very, very cool. Is that a hand-painted badge, or is that...
So hand-painted pinstripes, but that's actually one of the factory little RSR decals.
Oh, okay. Yep. Very good.
So yeah, we wanted to do a car. We built a number of cars for Audrain, and they wanted a 911 that was what we call the gentleman's RSR.
Right.
Everybody loves the look and feel of an RSR, but they're noisy and they rattle a bit and a little rough driving. And so we started with an 87 Carrera, which is a G50 car that really, of the G-body cars, it's just one of the best, cars that Porsche built, the end of that G-body era. And then we did, authentic RSR type flares and wheels. But inside the car is where the magic is. The car has tractive suspension, which is a semi-active electronically controlled suspension, so we can control the ride. It's got big turbo brakes. Ed Pink did a 425 horsepower engine that has lots of torque. And then inside the car, it has classic retrofit electric air conditioning, the new classic Recaro seats, which are very comfortable. But we did some of our little 356 touches to it as well.
Is it tricky putting air conditioning in an air-cooled car?
It's not. The classic retrofit is a full electric air conditioning system.
Yeah.
Because the 911, 964 based engines, you can run a 155 amp alternator, which is a big, massive alternator. Right. And then we run an anti-gravity lithium battery, so we have plenty of electrical energy to run the air conditioning system. It works extremely well. You just have to maximize your condenser and your cooling system, and it really works good in these cars.
Now, is it a choice? Is there a cap on these wheels?
There is. It can have a cap, but RSRs, a lot of times on the race cars, they ran it without, so we haven't decided if we're going to run caps or leave it a little racy looking on the outside.
I always figure one cap falls off, so then you take off the other three. Yeah.
There's a lot of fun stuff that we did. We're 356 guys, right? So we use the German square weave carpet inside. We put luggage straps like you would have on a 356, in the back. And just a lot of little subtle, things on the car. But again, we wanted to really build a gentleman's RSR.
And much wider tires than you would ever gotten back
Absolutely.
in the day.
Well, they're 9-inch and 11-inch
And you
wheels.
added the flares.
We did.
Yeah.
We did. Yeah. So again, we don't do a lot of 911s. You can see a few others here. But we do 911s for clients that we've already built 356s or specials or outlaws for.
Very good. Well, Rod, terrific. We'll be at the seminar tomorrow. So
excellent.
Hey,
well, thank you so much for spending some time with me.
It's really great. It's great to see a family tradition and something that was once an outlaw because it was sort of outlawed become part of America. So much of American culture is like that,
Absolutely.
Snoop Dogg, he used to get arrested every week. Now he's hosting the Super Bowl. Emery used to be all Porsches. That's not a real Porsche. Now it's the one everybody wants. So congratulations, my friend.
Well, thank you. We're going to have a great weekend, beautiful weather, and the crowds are showing up.